And we're back.
Yay.
Part 2. All right, I do remember where we left off, but we were talking outside, and I think that it's important we talk about what we were talking about, because now you're a grandparent and how that's so much different. And the backstory I'll give is I was listening or watching a show and listened to a guy talk, and he talked about how he is able to give his grandson what he wasn't able to give his children. And I was like, man, that's interesting. And I think that plays a lot to the dynamic of like how I wish grandparents were way more involved now in the children's lives, and how absolutely important it is, because they do get to bring a whole nother level of something to the relationship that you know, we as parents sometimes can't or forget or are overlooked and all that kind of stuff. And you start telling stories about your experience as a grandmother. And I would like you to share a couple of them, because I think it's important, right? Especially if you live in a place where your children can be exposed to your mom and dad. Or, you know, I have friends that moved back home for that purpose and thought they were going to get the help, and then the grandparents tapped out and were like, oh, it's too much, which then lends itself to the fact of why you want to stay healthy and young. You know, as a grandparent, because my God, if Sloan has kids someday, like, oh, fuck, I want to be like the best. I'm going to be like, let's go do all the shit, you know, because you do get to give them back, and you get to be just that thing of fun and you know, teaching without the attachment of like really the discipline, which is cool. But
it's awesome because, you know, I made my parents grandparents kind of early because I was a very young mom. And my kids kind of did the same thing. You know, they were older than me when they became parents. But you know, I got to be a grandma for the first time at age 39. And now I'm 43, and my 5th grandchild, number 5, is scheduled to arrive on the 30th.
Wow. I love it.
And I have 3 granddaughters and 5 granddaughters. Wow. So I've kept the female lineage really tight and really going.
Yeah.
I say that I've done it as if I can claim credit to that, but I like to claim a little bit.
A little bit. You got to be present there.
I love the girls. But yeah, it's so true. You know, when I was raising my children, you know, I did make my grandparents young, and they were going through a divorce. They were going through some kind of like life meltdown at that point. And I think we were talking also about how the fact that, you know, by the time you're about 35 to 40, your brain is pretty much programmed by all of the repetitious stuff or things that you've been taught over your life.
Yeah, you got to put massive effort into change.
Yeah, you really do. And for most people, the programming isn't quite working, but it's working just enough that they won't change it, you know, or it's like, well, you know, I've had this job for 20 years. Why change it now? Well, you know, I've been doing this for 10 years. Why change it now? And that change is a really hard thing. And I'm kind of lucky that my change kind of had to happen or I die, because I could get stuck in that rut. And because of that change that I've created, I've learned so much more. And also internet. You know, I raised my kids without internet. There was no Google.
No Google to help.
Well, I mean, now there might have been Google, but not everyone had a computer in their home, much less on your phone.
Well, we had the... I remember trying to look up like pictures of like Dragon Ball Z, and I'd like pull up the page, and then I'd go play outside for 3 hours and come back, and like one picture would be downloaded. I'm like, can we print it, Mom? Like,
and I remember I racked up a huge bill because the internet used to cost $10 an hour.
Oh my God.
I don't think anybody really remembers that.
Wow.
The internet used to cost $10 an hour for the phone line connection. The phone company would charge you for the connection. But yeah, so, you know, I raised my kids without internet, but now that there's so much parenting advice, there are podcasts, there's blogs, there's YouTube channels, there's so much out there.
Experts,
not only of
specialists.
and they're going on and they're offering great stuff. And I've learned so much about what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a grandparent. And like you had mentioned, what you had heard is that it gives you that chance to parent your grandchildren, not really parent your grandchildren, but do with your grandchildren what you couldn't with your children. And the knowledge just wasn't there, you know, and I'm only in my 40s. So, you know, this isn't some old fangle thing. The internet actually hasn't been so accessible until more recent years. But yeah, it taught me so much. And I realized that, like, you know, I was telling you a story about when my grandkids come home. Now, mind you, I live on the same property as my daughter. And when the grandkids come home, I step outside and they come running up, Grandma. It's awesome. And I have grandkids who are in Ohio. Every time I call them, it's like, Grandma's on video call. That we didn't have.
Yeah, definitely not.
So there's the internet and all of this connectivity, social media, all of that has created such an outlet for us to be able to connect more. And also to realize how valuable we are. I was telling you how my young granddaughter, she's not even 2 yet. And so when she comes running out of the car to come say hi to Grandma and Papa, her little wobbly legs, sometimes she's like on the it is. Yeah. They're right on the verge of falling over as they're running to you. And she comes running up the driveway and she's like, Papa, Papa. And now, mind you, this is a totally different person than the father we were talking about before.
Yeah.
We'll go over that.
We're going to go over that.
At some point.
Maybe episode 3.
Yeah.
That's okay.
You might be ready to come on by then. But yeah, she loves saying Papa because the moment she learned how to say Papa, he would give her undivided attention with those words.
Yep.
She says, Papa. And he's like, yes. And sometimes she'll just look at him and go, hee. It was so cute at one of the family functions. She was sitting on the patio table and she looks over and she goes, Papa. And she pats on the seat right next to her. She just wanted Papa to sit there because Papa gives her undivided attention. Oh, he did, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
He loves the grandkids' attention.
Yeah.
But, they really just want someone who can give them undivided attention for even that minute. And parents can't do that.
And I say that a lot in like a lot of stuff I talk about. What I have realized with Sloan is that almost everything boils down to her wanting to feel loved, seen, heard, and wanting attention. Mm-hmm. And all she is a mini woman. I mean, it's like there isn't a great code to crack. There isn't a million books you need to read. Like you just look at it and go, where am I lacking of showing up? Or how is she just, in essence, crying out for attention like we all have done, right? It's that simple. And when you look at it through that lens, and that's where I think the grandparents have such an opportunity to give that because you can't do it too much, right? I think that's like an old, if you're not hard on your children or you love them, I think someone did a study where they like followed kids for 20 or 30 years. It's important. They showed that it's like impossible to love your children too much. Yeah. Like it's impossible to dote on them too much. Right.
But if you think about it, like with what you're saying, that kids want to be loved, seen, heard, understood, given that attention. And as grandparents, we get to do that. But if you think about it, most grandparents nowadays are at least my age or older. I'm a very young grandparent.
Yeah.
Do they know what it looks like to be seen, heard, and understood? Because many times people are walking around in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they have never felt seen, heard, or understood. Yeah. So how can they give that to a child when they don't even have that for themselves? And I think that might be a lot of what's missing in that. So sorry to interrupt you. I was just, wanted to kind of pull in. This is why I love talking. Yeah. But it's true. And, I've gotten that opportunity because of the healing work that I've done for myself and that I take other people through, is that I've had the opportunity to let my inner child feel seen, heard, and understood in her pain. Yeah. And when I was able to finally do that, it became so much easier to give that. Yeah. Because, when you give something like that, you try to give something like that away and you haven't received it, it's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful because you're like, God, this is everything I haven't received. You almost want to cry over your own love you're giving away.
It's a limited resource.
Right.
Because it's in essence what you've been taught, right? Mm-hmm. Behave a certain way, get loved, which makes it a limited resource.
Yes.
But it's not.
Exactly.
Which is fascinating. Yeah. And that's grandparents like you. I believe, because I know I'm a father, I desire to give Sloan that all the time. Of course. Okay, but I don't have someone else paying my bills. I don't have someone else cleaning the house. I don't have someone doing the dishes, cooking the meals, doing the laundry, boom, but growing the business, all those things. So in modern society, when you start to stack those up, the time you get to do that diminishes in balancing that. And that's where I think having connected grandparents like you comes in. And it's like the child still gets to feel all of those things and grow up understanding I still got it from dad. I still got it from mom. Grandma was like the rock, though, because you hear that in like old Italian families. Like grandma was the rock. Well, this is why, because she had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Right. You this is your thing. When you're with them, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, you don't have to worry about the dishes or the laundry.
And I can tell you that, like, when I would see, because there was a lot that, I desired from my mother or from my father that I didn't get in my childhood.
Of course.
But when I got to see them give it to my children, it helped heal that a little bit inside for me. Yeah. Because our children are an extension energetically of us. Yeah. So when they're receiving love, we feel that. Yeah. When they're receiving pain, we feel it, Yeah. And so by me being able to give this to my granddaughters, taking trips all the way to Ohio, driving up there just to see the grandkids, and spend time and watch them for the weekend and have all the fun and chaos with them. I get to give that back to my kids because I didn't have time for the loving and nurturing. I was an alcoholic. I was raising 3 daughters with very, very little help, outside help. And I was trying to make life happen. I was trying to keep us with a roof over our head and food on the table. I didn't have time to go, I'm sorry, do you need a little bit more attention from mommy? Yeah. For me, it was like, how dare you ask for that attention? I've got so many things on my mind. So you do need those connected grandparents. And when we show up that way, we offer so much more than just those sweet moments with our grandchildren. Yeah. I mean, we are doing some lineage work when we're showing up as a grandparent.
I mean, it's interesting because that's the way I view everything, right? Like we're correcting mistakes, and that's in essence, what the religions talk about, like the sins of the father will be passed down for 3 generations. This is what they're talking about, right? Like that's the subconscious programming will be passed down, and it's our job to unwire that. But I think you said something that was awesome about the parents.
I can never repeat anything.
No,
I have no idea.
It's all right. It's all right. It'll come back to me.
But there's this there's a lot of lineage truth to it. I recently had a visit with my mom, and my mom and I are coming a lot more closer together as both of us are grandparents, and we're bonding over different things, more grown up things, I guess you could say.
Well, I think real quick, I remember what it was. I think that when you're doing what you're doing now, and you're in essence, the children are healing through the love you can give the grandchildren that you couldn't give them at the time. And the same with your mother, like watching your mother maybe with your children now and those kinds of things. I think that it also allows the child to understand where mom was coming from and why mom couldn't necessarily keep it all together all the time. Right. And then like once they become parents, like, oh, fuck, I kind of get it. Mm-hmm. Like I think some of the stuff that I don't want to say resented or didn't understand, like why I couldn't have attention from my dad or whatever when I was growing up. Once I became a parent, I kind of was like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of moved past that. Like, you're forgiven. This makes sense. Yeah. Where it was like you don't understand until you've popped one out and you're like, fuck. Mm-hmm. And so I think just that alone did massive healing for me.
Yeah.
Like the little things that I held on to that I'm just like, how dare you?
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah.
And also knowing
you kept a roof over your fucking head and bought you pizza on Friday. It's good, man. Like you're good.
Yeah. Well, also, when we have traumas or pains from our past that we don't really want to look at, that means that we also don't really want to look at that time in our lives, period. One of the things that I learned, is that, alcohol, it would black me out from all of the pain, but also all the joy. And the same is with trauma. Trauma and pains, it does the same thing. It causes a part of us to just go, nope, we're going to pretend like you don't exist. And so a part of us is removed from who we are accepting, who we're being, how we're showing up in the world. Creating that resistance. I go on and on about that. Yeah. But
just hire Cassandra. It's awesome, I promise.
Like, wait, where was I going with that? We were talking about resistance and a part of us. Oh yeah. So you don't remember the joys of your childhood when you're not willing to look at the pains of it. Because the more that I was willing to look at the pain of my childhood and say, you know what, this part existed, I get to either forgive and let this be a part of me and accept this part of me, or I get to be in resistance to it the whole time. And so is everything else that happened in that period of my life. Right. So when we become and this is how I've actually regained my memory from so many years of being blackout drunk. I mean, I had very little memory, and the only way to get it back was being willing to feel the pain I wasn't willing to feel way back then. All that pain that I drank away, all the pain that I just went, whoop, nope, we're going to pretend like that doesn't exist. I have to be willing to go through it. And it's not like reliving it. It's revisiting it. Revisiting it.
Yeah.
Because we're not living through it. We're just acknowledging it's there. And when we revisit it like that and let ourselves finally feel it, finally grieve it, finally go through it, all of a sudden, and this is what I have had in my experience and others have shared with me is similar in their experience, is that it's like, wow, you know what? Okay, so yeah, I had a neglectful dad, but now that I finally accepted, okay, dad was neglectful, he was very distant, all this stuff. And I go in and I get to accept how that's shown up in me. And you know what? That's part of me. I get to accept it and shift it however it serves me better. Once I did that, it was like, you know what? There were so many great memories. They all come flooding back in, and it helps to ease that. And hearing your parents' story also, and your parents talking to you like imperfect human beings is so huge. When my mom finally told me about the struggles they had, when we were babies, and how, the way she felt when she met my dad, and the way she felt about all this stuff before I had a conscious memory of what was going on, and I got to see her backstory, it made her so much more human, so much more relatable. And I could go, oh, mom's imperfect like me. Okay. Yeah. Not only do I get to forgive easier, but I get to forgive myself easier, because when I look at my mother, I see a reflection of how I show up in the world. When I look at my father, I see the reflection of how I get treated in the world. And that wasn't doing so well for me.
Yeah, for sure. Wasn't bringing out all the beautiful memories of life.
No, it wasn't.
Not at all. It's interesting because I think it's precisely why I try hard not to hide my emotions from Sloan. Because I want her to see, like, dad's not perfect. She'll say it. She goes, there's no such thing as perfection. Yeah. And then, like, the other day I hit her with, I said, but in the moment, it's perfect. Yeah. And we were coloring, and she was like, and I was like, it'll make sense later. She's just like, made a joke or something. And I'm like, yeah. It was
You're over there amusing yourself.
it was so funny. And, but I've taught her at a younger age, very early on, that certain behaviors were not how you were going to get dad's attention, whatever those behaviors were, whether it's lashing out or throwing a tantrum or any of these things. And I literally told her, because I've never talked to her. I've said, Sloan, this is not how you get dad's attention at all. You need to verbalize what you want, and I'm more than happy to do my best to give it to you, And so there are times where she'll literally just come up to me and be like, Dad, I need attention. Done. You're speaking into existence what you need. And imagine that in a relationship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's going to show up in a relationship ready to ask for exactly what she wants when she wants it. And whoever she meets is not going to be prepared for that.
Yeah, no, I'm already worried about that. But but I love it. It's funny. But that's what I want to create. I want to create a woman who's not going to accept less, right? Because we've all done that. And then we're like, fuck, what are we doing? 9 years later, you realize, like, damn, I didn't know how to ask for what I want, or whatever. And to be honest, as a man, when you tell me blatantly what you want and need, you give me the blueprint on how to love you. Mm-hmm. And then it's easy. Yeah. Because I want to do it. And I want a checklist. And I want to win the checklist.
And that's what I do in my own relationship, where I had to learn how to be what you're teaching your daughter to be and speak up for myself. Yeah. And it was funny to see him just like, you just asked for what you want. Like, that's it. You just asked for what you wanted. And now I get to just do it. I was like, I like yellow flowers. And if I'm ever wanting flowers, I'm going to drop you hints by saying stuff like, yellow flowers would be nice. He's like, that's not even a hint. That's actually a direction.
It's so easy.
And the thing is that we get to let go of this idea that if they do it without us asking, it means more.
Oh,
because it's such bull.
I love that.
It's bull. If I send him a text, I would love some yellow flowers. He'll come home with yellow flowers, just like, look what I got you. Here's your yellow flowers. Maybe not that excited.
Yeah, but I love that. I mean, because it's women, what goes through a woman's mind and what goes through a man's mind all day, first are very different. especially if the man or woman is in the middle of creating a business and raising a child and doing all these things. Like, I don't live in a fantasy world where I think about my partner 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking about how to provide for my partner and how to get us more leverage and do this so that we can go on vacation, so that we can get a second home, so that we can get another rental. Like, these are the things I'm thinking about all day, like how to leverage what we have to get us more of what we want.
Yeah.
As much as I love the idea that I would just think to get you flowers, it might not happen because I'm creating something.
Yeah.
Right. And I was with my ex, and I remember at one point saying something like, I think we should plan sexual time together, like put it on the calendar. And it was not received super well because it was not spontaneous and not in the moment and not desiring and all these kinds of things. And I was like, oh, well, I get where you're coming from. But to me as the man, it's like, yeah, but then I can show up in that moment 100% on that, because from 9 to 10, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about the business or the this or the that.
And you're not having to guess, is she in the mood? Is she going to be doing this? It's like, okay, we've both agreed, and you can set up the space. I actually tell my clients to do that. I'm like, spontaneous sex is wonderful. Quickies are wonderful. Making love all night long, wonderful. But you know what? Planning it out and creating a space and showing up with solid intention to bring each other just connection, unity, intimacy, pleasure, sensuality, all of these things. Yeah. There's something powerful in that.
For sure. For sure there is. And because it allows presence to be brought into it, right? And sure, there's presence in the quickie, but I've had plenty of quickies where I'm like, all right, I got 5 minutes and then I got to do this for the business.
Yeah.
And I'm not there. She's having orgasms. It's good.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
and you do that enough times, you'll show up with premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And or I'm like, oh, I got an exam or, whatever.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I'm not that in it. But it's fun. It's physical and it's good. But it's like, to plan it out, I think there's so much more presence that can be taken in there. And I think that, again, that's why asking for what you want as a woman, I'm giving you the life hack. I'm literally giving every woman the life hack on how to get what you want from your man is fucking tell him.
Yeah.
Write a list, all the things you like, how you want to do them.
And knowing that him reading your mind is an impossibility. It's not going to happen. You didn't marry a psychic. Even a psychic can't read your mind. Yeah. It's just, you can't.
Yeah.
So letting go of that equating, it's kind of like the diamond. The diamond was put into our heads to be this gemstone that is extremely valuable and
rare. If it was rare, there wouldn't be 9 jewelry stores in the mall.
They wouldn't be making them in factories, It's and so it's just ingrained in us, and it's been ingrained in women that, and this is where it came from doesn't matter, but it's definitely from a time when we really don't want to think that way anymore,
Sure.
Where we just take whatever the man gives us because we're subservient to them. And so that kind of moved over into, well, he'll surprise you with flowers, as if we don't get to ask for it. I feel empowered that I get to ask for flowers.
And then I feel empowered because I get to give you exactly what you want and not guess.
Yeah.
That I love.
Yeah. And my husband does the same thing for me. If he's wanting something, feeling something, thinking some way, we are very direct with each other. We both have similar traumas that we came in with, where we're like, we need communication. We need it to be clear. I want to understand you, and I want to feel understood.
Yeah. And I think there's also ways now that we're talking it out to bypass it, because I do this for Sloan sometimes, is I'll set reminders on my phone every 3 or 4 months to just show up at Sloan School with flowers.
Aww.
Because I'll even forget that, I just do, it's, but I'll set a reminder that's like, hey, bring Sloan flowers tomorrow. And so I'll stop and I'll get flowers and I'll take them to her. So there's ways around it if surprising is a thing. And that's a good thing. I mean, we can talk about that. So you could literally communicate to him, I like being surprised with flowers. And then, we have calendars. You can do that.
Yeah, you have technology.
You have technology. You can make it happen, but
that's also asking for what you want.
Exactly, it's asking.
And
for
you
what
can
want.
Ask for the surprise.
Yes.
But you have to obviously do that far in advance.
Yeah.
To help with the surprise effect
for sure.
But if you tell somebody in the beginning of your relationship, like, listen, I'm gonna be straight with you. I love to be surprised with yellow roses a couple times a year. Just surprise me.
Yeah.
Well, you've put it out there, and now the fact that it's a surprise, well, you can't really remind them, but you have put it out there that this is what I'm asking for. So that is still asking for what you want, being clear and giving that instruction, and still being surprised with it.
100%. And I promise you, as a woman, as a man to a woman, if you do these things and he's the guy and the right guy, he'll do them. Mm-hmm. He will prioritize them. And if he doesn't, there's a good way to tell he's not it.
Absolutely.
Because we want to do that for our person. We want to make you feel that way. We want to do them.
I'll ask, I've asked for certain things, and like I've had to ask for them over and over because not everybody remembers everything all the time. But now, you know, I mean, obviously we're married and everything now. You know, when we go to have sex, he knows to shut the fan off, turn the lighting on the way that I like it, make sure the TV is off, nice music because I'm very sensory.
Oh yeah.
And so if there's a TV show playing in the background or anything, I cannot concentrate at all. I'm like, ah! So he knows these certain things to do. And so boom, 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 he does it. And it's like, woo,
you're right in it.
And it's so nice because I don't have to ask for it anymore. I don't have to be halfway in it like, oh God, we didn't shut the TV off, you know, certain things like that. So it's really wonderful when you learn how to do this stuff.
Well, and I think I love how we just get on these. This is why we're going to have so many of these podcasts. But these are valuable. This is so valuable because also you brought up, you've had to remind him more than once. Mm-hmm. Nothing in your life have you done it once and been the best at it.
No, definitely not.
It's okay to fucking tell him more than once. Hey, do you remember when? But then it's your job as the woman to not get an attitude because that's the fastest way to not get what you want from me.
Yeah.
Tell me, oh, I told you I want flowers and then I didn't get them, or you had to remind me again and then get an attitude. You're not fucking getting flowers.
Well, it's understanding a genuine mistake versus just not giving a shit, right. You know? And if you don't know that, which one it is with your partner, they're probably not a very close partner. You probably need to work on that connection a little bit more because it's pretty obvious when someone's like, oh, I am so sorry. Oh, wow. You know, and then, or oh, sorry. Yeah. You know, you know the difference. And when someone has the intention to do it how you want and they get it wrong once, twice, maybe even 3 times, you know, and it's just shifting that a little bit. It's learning how to guide.
Or maybe they're trying in another way and you have to remind them like, hey, remember, that's not really the way I like it. Those are all normal things.
You know what the hardest thing is though?
No, but I do want to know what it is. What is it?
And this, I've done this, so I know how hard it is. It's when you're
I was going to insert a sex joke there, but that's okay.
It's actually about sex.
Okay, even better.
When you're in a relationship and you never really focused as much on it before, but it's starting to show up, a repetition that they're doing something in a way that you'd actually prefer it in a different way. But if you say it now, it's like, is it too late? Should I have said it in the beginning? They've been doing this now for months. Now they're going to know that for months I haven't been enjoying it. Like all this stuff, like imagine I'm making this up because, you know, I'm not going to go over me and my husband's sex life on here because I didn't ask him first. Of course, so I'll make up stories. Sure. Say, you know, the way that when you're going down on him and he puts his hand on the back of your head and you don't like that, but you just, it's okay because you know your mouth is full. You can't really tell him in the moment. You may do something like, you know, glide his hand off of you, but you know, he keeps on doing it. And then finally, say 6 months into the relationship, you're just like, okay, I'm never giving this guy a blowjob again if he freaking puts his hand on the back of my head. Sure. Now I got to talk to him about it. So now there's so much more emotion in it. And having that conversation late in the relationship, very hard to do. Very hard to do, but so necessary. And actually not as bad as you think. I got myself so worked up over it. And that wasn't the situation. He doesn't put his hand in the back of my head. Although I don't like that.
Yeah. Something there for you to work through. You should hire yourself.
It's a control thing. You
should hire yourself to get through that.
I know why it's there. I've accepted that part of me.
But I love that though. And yeah, it is. And I think it's all in how you bring it up. Because he doesn't want to feel emasculated. Yeah. Because it's important. It's like men want to make sure that they're, well, I guess in your scenario it would be vice versa. But, well, not really, because we still want to feel like we're pleasing the woman in every aspect of what we're doing, you know? So to know you haven't been, it's kind of like a kick in the dick. Yeah.
Well, I experienced that in an old marriage of mine. And I didn't have orgasms with him the first couple of weeks. And I didn't think anything of it because for me that was normal at the time. Oh, yeah. And so I told him. And I was not prepared for his reaction to that. He got angry, he got all the things. And I told him in a very blatant way, but he was also extremely immature. That's why the marriage didn't last very long. I married him as a drunk and divorced him as a drunk. So it was not a stellar
Can't figure out why that didn't work.
Oh, no.
It was definitely the lack of orgasms.
Yeah. That with a million different things. Yeah. But yeah, it's a hard thing to do sometimes. It's to really have.
But
those
it is
difficult
necessary because I don't want to keep doing that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's necessary. Like, so if you bring it up, then give them space at the same time. Like, don't keep.
Also some compassion, not making it to be the big deal that is. Because the truth is, if it was that big of a deal, you would have said something much sooner.
Sure.
And that is true. For me, the situation that it was for us wasn't really that big of a deal. But over and over and over again, it was like, okay, well, if we're going to do this often, let's do it right.
Yeah.
And I approached it just more like this wasn't that big of a deal. But, I noticed that you enjoy doing this. So if you enjoy doing this, can we just do it like a little bit different in a way that I think might be a little bit more pleasurable. So let's just try it out. And you offer to him just like, let's just try out a different way.
Well, and I think that's the awesomeness about what you bring to the table and help people understand is that I have this belief system that we have shunned sex and sexuality through religion so that we can't, because we know that it's a carnal thing in us. And we've done that very much for the exploitive gain of being able to turn around and sell you sex at every corner.
Yeah.
Because if you're lacking it and we sell it to you, you'll buy anything, right? And so bringing it more into the forefront like you do, where this is like normal. This should be talked about like you talk about the budget. Yeah. Like you talk about buying a home. Or if you're going to read, like you don't just come home and your wife just, well, maybe some people do, but for the most part, you don't come home and like the bathroom's being fucking redone.
Yeah.
Like that's how sex should be viewed in the relationship because it's arguably more important than all of those things because it creates everything. And
there's great ways to have those discussions that, don't have to feel, don't have to turn into an argument. When you learn different methods for communication, there's lots of methods out there. There's Imago is the first one that comes to mind. It was developed in 1980, I believe. Dr. Hendricks and Dr. Hunt, can't remember their first name. Dr. Hendricks and Dr. Hunt came up with this concept. And it's actually quite simple. It just slows a conversation down. So it's not just a bunch of words being spewed out, interpreted by the listener, and then them bringing back their response to what they've interpreted, instead breaking that conversation down a little bit slower. So that interpretation is then mirrored back to them. So that way they get to correct if that interpretation was incorrect in any way. If I tell you, oh gosh, Rocco, I love the red and the blue and the white that's on the walls, and in your mind you interpret it, she loves the American flag, and you say, okay, so what I'm hearing is you love the American flag, and be like, no, Rocco, that's not it. I mean, I got nothing against the American flag, but it allows space for me to feel, and that's the part of feeling heard, seen, and understood, is that we're being interpreted the way that we intend for our message to be conveyed. And this allows for that interpretation to be shifted by the person that's conveying the message. So if you're mirroring everything back to me and I get to tweak it and adjust and say, well, that's not exactly right. You had this part right, but this part I am actually meant da-da-da-da-da. And then when you get it right, I'm like, yeah, that's it. And then you get to empathize with, okay, now that I understand it and I understand the message you're trying to convey, gosh, how would that feel for me? And being able to empathize and validate the person for their feelings.
I think it's important too, because we know no 2 points of perception are the same. Mm-hmm. So going through those steps, I'm like, oh man, I tried. It's interesting because I try to do that with Sloan now, but I'm like, okay, I could add some more layers to it. Like I try and communicate that way with her because I think it's so important. But that was interesting. So what I've noticed in relationships is, I also think for was John Gottman. He's a Love Lab guy, right? Mm-hmm. John Gottman, fucking boss. But he talks about taking because the cortisol, whatever one of them is, the stress hormone. Cortisol. I get so many hormones in my brain. So the cortisol is going nuts when you're in the midst of an argument or in the midst of an uncomfortable situation, or you're bringing up like, hey, don't put your hand on the back of my head. Like immediately the cortisol spikes, right? And it takes 20 minutes for it to go down. So he talks about separating and taking time for 20 minutes, reading a magazine, going for a walk, doing anything but that, and then coming back together and having the conversation, and it will radically shift the point of perception from then on out, because no longer is that response happening. Mm-hmm. I do that with Sloan all the time, and it changes everything. Just simply being like, I don't need to fix it in this situation right now. Throw your tantrum, do whatever. I'm unwilling to participate. I'm going to go over here. We're going to do this. And in 20 minutes, almost like clockwork, in 20 minutes, she'll come back to me. Yeah. Right? Because you as an adult don't know how to control that chemical response. You expect a 6-year-old to know how to fucking control it? Like,
exactly.
Give me a break. You know, and I think that's how allowed me to have a lot more compassion for the growing up of Sloan, is to be able to look at it in that manner and be like, okay, it's a chemical reaction happening. It's overtaking her right now. I do have the opportunity to teach her that we have more control over our minds, because it's something I teach her all the time. But when the response is happening is not the time to teach her. Like, you don't tell the alcoholic when they've had 19 shots, hey, you're an alcoholic, we need to go to rehab. Like, you'll wait until they sober up a little bit, you know, like,
wait until they're feeling the shit.
Yeah. You know, and so I think that's kind of super important in terms of that too, because I've noticed when I'm in a relationship or things, that if I walk away and I take a day, I might not talk about it, but I'm processing through it on the back end. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. Let me just make that shift and make that change. And I think that's I think it's valuable, because I think a lot of men are like that, where it's like, we talked about reminding them to buy flowers, but a lot of times if it's something big, I don't really know. I don't need to be reminded that many times of something I did wrong. I just need to understand where you're coming from, why you think it's that way. Get to the same point of perception together, like you talked about with Hunt and whatever his name was. Hendricks. And Hunt and Hendricks, get to that same point, and then I don't necessarily need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
I'll self-correct. And I think that then tends to drive women mad, because you want to talk about things a lot. And it's like, no, but you told me, and now I'm going to go integrate it, and we're good. Uh-huh. You know, and so again, back to the communication.
And that can go back to maybe she doesn't always feel seen, heard, and understood. So she's got to say it over again and over again and over again. Yeah. Did you hear me? Did you hear me? Did you hear me?
Yeah.
And so, it is that cycle. And that's why it's so important that when these conversations are happening, you have a way of communicating that each person is feeling like they are being seen, heard, understood. As many times we say it over and over again, but it's true.
But that's all we all want.
Yeah. It really is. You know, we've had situations in my marriage that have come up where I'm just like, listen, you know, this aspect is showing up a lot, and I really we need to work on something to change this. And all ears, all eyes, that is just full attention. And men really, when they love you, when they really are committed to you and want to make a relationship work, they're going to do it. Yeah. And it's just like, yes, please. I'm absolutely ready to change and shift. And, you know, it's not about trying to change the person. I hate using that word change, although we are changing all the time. Yeah. But, you know, obviously you fall in love with the man and the human that is in front of you. Yeah. And we are falling in love with each other over and over again because we're constantly changing. Yep. And sometimes changes go on a downhill. Sometimes they go on an uphill. And you get to love them both ways, but you also get to encourage them into a way that's more productive for the highest good of your relationship.
One of my friends told me a quote, it was probably a year or two ago, and she was like, you know, I believe a marriage is, in essence, and this is probably, maybe it's a quote from someone else, I don't know, but I heard it from her. She was like, marriage is in essence watching 1,000 deaths and 1,000 rebirths of your partner. I was like, oh, that's huge. Yeah. You know, because that's what it comes down to, you know. And in terms of also bringing everything up as men, you can't do it in a nagging way.
Yeah.
Or else I don't view it as something. Then I'm like, well, I don't actually need to change. You're just nagging the shit out of me. You know, and it's like timing matters. All these things matter. And I know that just from growing up and observing my parents. Like, there were definitely things that needed brought up. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one of my parents chose to bring it up as soon as the other parent got home from work and stepped foot in the door. Well, maybe after an hour work day, with 2 hours of driving, that's not the best time.
No. That's sort of like we were saying, having time set aside for sex, having time set aside. If you're doing great in your relationship, set time aside once a month. Just sit down and go, how are we doing?
Yeah.
Are we good? Are there any things that we can work on and do better with? And if you're having struggles, sitting down once or twice a week and being like, okay, how are you feeling about the situation that we're dealing with?
Yep.
What's coming up for you? What's been processing through your head? And again, like you say, with the nagging or getting them right when they come home from work. Well, obviously set an appointment. That's not something you want to do.
Yeah.
But after enough time of feeling seen, heard, and understood, there's no need to nag.
Yeah.
There's no need to bring it up again.
Yep.
So many of the problems, and I'm being raised in a very fundamentalist Christian background. I was raised. It was like I was raised in the 1920s, 1930s. It's crazy. But there's this kind of I guess generational trauma with women. I might be saying that wrong. Where we're not heard or seen, not until around the time I was born, were women allowed to have a checking account that weren't opened by their husbands or their fathers. They weren't allowed to own property. Right. Women were not heard, seen, or understood. And so men were like, oh, they're such nags. Oh, they're such this. And now we're coming to a point where women are being seen, are being heard, are being understood, are being accepted. They're being seen as equals in society. I mean, we're not fully there yet, but we've made amazing progress along the way. And a lot of those issues have gone away.
She doesn't mean equal in like sports and things. She means equal in our ability.
I mean equal treatment, because men and women are very different and also very, very much alike.
I just want to make sure we're clear on that in today.
Today's day and age. That's true. Equality has gotten very to where it has a lot of meanings.
Yeah, I knew what you meant, but I just wanted to just
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But go ahead.
But now that we're coming to this place where the equality when it comes to the way that we're being treated in a fair fashion is getting better.
Yes.
A lot of those issues start to fade away as soon as we're just acknowledged.
Yeah.
Imagine that, women just want to be acknowledged.
It's super interesting. And I think, I'm taking so many notes in my head, and I'm like, I can't wait to have to re-listen to this so I can take all the things. Cause this was my favorite part about this job, is I learn so much. And, two of my best friends, Bree and Barry, who've been on the podcast, they get together every year and they sit down and they plan out the books they're going to read together as a couple for the year. They sit down and they talk about their goals. They do all of these things. And it just reaffirms everything you just said, because I highly doubt and know that she's not nagging him when she asks for things.
Yeah.
He doesn't perceive it that way.
Yeah.
And it's because they're both seen and heard, and they talk and they have amazing communication. And I to me, that's amazing that they're able to have that, and the perception when you don't have that, especially then, is the man who gets defensive, let's say, or the woman who came home from work, vice versa. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Let's say the woman came home from work and, the man brings something up and she's like, I just worked 12 fucking hours today.
Yeah.
To put a roof over her head and buy us dinner and do all these other things, so we can go on vacation tomorrow, or whatever it is. That's what goes through their mind. They immediately get in that defensive mode when you don't have these strategies in place, like Bree and Barry do, or you and your husband, and all these things you brought up. And so I think it's invaluable to understand that it's okay to schedule. Mm-hmm.
It's being able to be in love as adults rather than, reacting from the wounded inner child who goes, listen to me right now. I need your attention right now. Yeah. When do kids want our attention when we arrive home from work? Immediately.
Yeah.
And, if there's something that you walk in the door and you're just immediately being hit with from your husband or your wife, there's probably some triggering going on with what's happening. Because when we're in love as adults, we can go, okay, you know what, they've had a stressful day. We do have an issue to discuss, but it can wait until they've relaxed, because I want them in the best headspace so we can come up with the best outcome and the best communication that we can. That's adult thinking. But the inner child goes, I want to win.
Yeah.
I'm going to get him right when he's home, comes home, or she comes home right when they're weak in their head and they're exhausted, and I'm just going to ram right into them. That's like a child.
It all comes back to the same principles, which is what I love. I love that about personal development, right? It all comes back to the same things: love, seen, and heard. Okay, I do want to touch. I do want to touch on. I don't know if that's working. I do want to touch on. Oh, I'm supposed to start it. That's why it's not working. Can I get a time check? Okay.
Okay.
Let's touch, because we probably don't have enough time to finish the whole story. I love this. We'll do it again. We left off because I think it's important for people to understand, like, again, where you came from and why you're so good at everything you do. I think we left off. You were picking the children up, wanted to run him over. We're taking them out of that environment, and I definitely and I remember specifically you saying, like, there were masculine men who helped me along my way. That really, like, it was really important. Like, we talked about you starting in the club and all that stuff, because we condemn masculinity a lot right now, you know. And I think maybe I said it on the last one, but I have a shirt that says intoxicating masculinity, and I think I'm going to make one that says intoxicating femininity, but because they are. But I definitely want to talk about the biker situation, because that's a perfect example of, like, masculine help that was pivotal in your time. It was probably one of the first times you felt like, oh my God, men are here for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's more in between those two things, we can talk about them, because I'm sure there is, but I definitely, if we can get to at least that point today, that'd be good.
Yeah. You know, it was, I was just moved in with my mom, leaving, were you talking about the bikers when I left him?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was when I first left him when I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then let's talk about that then.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm like, there's no bikers after
timelines.
he did what he did. But okay, yeah, I gotcha.
Because there was a few timelines, I feel like, then, but let's talk about them.
Yeah. So my stepfather, and you know, this is what's great about dads, is I had a dad, and he's a good dad. You know, he's got his flaws, but he's a good dad.
Yeah.
And I had a new dad come in with stepdad when I was 19 years old, when you think you don't need one. But this man has shown up in my life in so many great ways, because I have one dad that, you ever see Daddy's Home with Mark Wahlberg?
And who's the other dad in there?
Freaking, he plays on Elf. He's the
Will
Elf.
Ferrell.
Elf.
Will Ferrell. That's it.
Okay.
I did see that. Yeah.
That's my stepdad and my dad. Okay.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yes. I love that movie for that. I'm like, those are my dads. Yeah. But yeah, so when I first left him, you know, he had lots of threats, and I was 20 years old. I had 3 kids. I had no knowledge of life in any way, shape, or form. No internet, no nothing, no school, nothing. And I was scared. And I remember the way that I got away from him was I told him that we were moving back to Florida to be around my family to help us rebuild the marriage. And when I got to Florida, my mom and my brother and my stepdad and my sister-in-law came to pick up our stuff and move it to Florida. And he had still a week left at his job. And so he was going to do that and then transfer down. And when he got to Florida, it was like, no, you're not coming here. And the only way that I was able to do that and feel safe and secure was because my stepfather is a biker. And I don't know if I'm able to mention the biker club. I don't know how.
Let's not, because I think when we did the first one, after we said it, we were like, we probably shouldn't have mentioned that one. Yeah.
But you know, I think it's definitely, bikers are related to toxic masculinity. Yeah. But sometimes you need that. You need the toxic masculine to fight the toxic masculine.
Yeah.
And you know, we always talk about this masculine as if it's just men, but you know, whatever. But yeah, you know, he showed up, when Robert showed up to my mother and stepfather's house, there was quite a few bikers there on their bikes, ready to handle him. And he pulled up respectfully, spoke to my stepfather respectfully, backed right out of the driveway, and respectfully never came back. And it was great, because I needed that then. I was so weak, so hurt, so crushed in life, that the last thing I had energy for was to stand up to a 6'2", 280-pound man that really wanted to kill me. Yeah. And I just didn't have it in me. And so grateful for them. Yeah. So yeah, there's so many times like that men just stood up when they didn't have to. You know, I remember times when I would go out and I'd be blasted drunk. And this is a situation a lot of women have encountered when You drink too much. You do things that you might regret, and people take advantage of that. And oftentimes I was so drunk that it wasn't me doing things I regret. I was the body that was comatose, that was taken advantage of. And I became to the point where I assumed that's how it was, because that's how I was made love to during my marriage, was while I was sleeping or with me kind of mentally not involved. So that was the norm for me. To go on a night out. That was almost like the due that I would pay on having a fun night out was, well, some guy is probably going to end up at home with me, If not, these are things that only in recent times can I feel comfortable speaking out loud about. 10 years ago, I'd been so slut-shamed. Yeah. But, so many times I'd have a note on my table. My jeans were still intact, and I used to actually go out with a tampon in. So that way I would know whether something happened or not. That's how much of a blackout drunk I was. Wow. I was fully intact, and there'd be a note saying, hey, you had too much to drink last night. I drove your car home for you. I had a buddy pick me up. Your key is so-and-so. I couldn't do the alarm because you couldn't tell me the alarm code because you were too inebriated. And you'd think that it's this like Ben Affleck, nice looking man. These were old fat men from the strip club that happened to see me out one night, and they were like, hey, and instead of like, it's the most unassuming men that have shown up and just been like, no, I'm going to treat you like with respect, whether you're comatose or whether you're coherent. And those are like the bare minimum, but you know where I started from, the bare minimum. That's what I needed. I needed it so much. And men started showing up much more and more authentic in my life. And it's been this nice balance where I know that a lot of people experience the opposite sex or even the same sex in a very small way. But because of working at strip club, corporate America, having brothers, like all of this male influence in my life, I've seen so much of a greater variety of behaviors, of attitudes, of personalities, and stuff like that. And there's so much more good than there is bad. So much more good than there is bad. A lot of it is just simply misdirection. Misdirection from men who in their lives that didn't have the best mentality and push that onto them. But it didn't quite resonate, but they didn't know another way. Right. And as soon as they learn a new way, they're like, oh, that's so much better. I'd much rather treat people this way. 100%. And that's what really like spewed me in this direction of like slowly over time, I've just come into this direction of what I do now, which is actually just yesterday I got my certification as I'm officially certified as a holistic sexologist. Boom. Congratulations. Thank you. I'm very happy with that. Yeah. I've never been a titles person, but this one just feels right. Like it feels like it captures what I do so much better. I think so. It does. I agree with you a lot. Because I'm not super woo-woo, No, that's what I love about you. That's why we resonate. Like it's, there's a level of like woo-woo that's fine, but my something I guess I'm starting to talk more to people about now is, but what if the woo-woo's not around? You fall apart because then all that is an expensive Tylenol or an expensive whatever, or like it didn't fix anything. Yeah. You just replace something. Like we should live just open. We don't need all those things. But anyways, I digress. Yeah, I mean, there is a time and place for the placebo effect in everybody's healing. Yes, it's a rung on the ladder to the top. It's a rung, and it feels good to stay on that rung. Yeah, because it's easy. You don't have to try to figure stuff out. Right, and you give the power to this. Like if this is the crystal, right? Like we give this the power, and then it's like, oh, and then we don't have the power. But it's like, this is cool. Now I got a crystal. I can do the podcast all day as long as I'm holding this. As long as I have my crystal, I'm fine. If I have it, I'm good, It's sending off all the bad spirits. Right, warding off all the bad spirits. They're scientifically backed to a point. There is stuff like sage does remove some bacteria in the air, a good percentage of bacteria in the air. My dad went to the doctor for a fungus on his toe. He goes, get some organic tea tree oil and put it on it. There's lots of stuff that's not the placebo, but understanding like what it does and what it doesn't do.
Right. And where you can take your power back. That's what I want people to understand.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you that works every fucking time.
That's why I a lot of people call themselves healers, and they give the explanation, of course, I'm not your healer, I'm my healer, and I simply guide you through how to do it, which is true. Yeah. We all are our own healers. But I just choose not to use that terminology, because I really try to empower my clients that, I've healed myself. You're looking to heal yourself.
Yep.
I've found a bunch of great paths that work awesome. Some of them worked amazing on myself personally. Other ones I didn't necessarily use on myself because I may not have needed them, but they're great options. Let me guide you through it so I can show you how to be your best healer. Yep. That's more of the take that the intention I put onto my work.
I love it.
Because it not only empowers my clients, but it empowers me too. It empowers me to feel much more authentic in what I'm doing and what I'm teaching.
Yep.
And also, I don't like to try to control other people. I have enough control issues. Dominatrix and like being in control of my relationship. Like, I've got lots of control issues. I don't need to control all those other people too.
Oh my God, I love it. Yeah. How much time we got left? All right, let's wrap here, and then next time let's make a note for ourselves. We want to go from.
We didn't get
very far like we were supposed to. We'll pick up and we'll go kind of from when you pick the kids up at the school.
Yeah.
Until present day, if we can get it all in of, the new amazing husband that I love and all the other things. I don't want to say his name because it's not my husband, but
his name's Chris.
Okay, yeah. So that I do want to cover because a lot happened in there, right? Yeah. A lot of the healing. Like we talked about all the trauma, we talked about all the shit, but then let's talk about the muck and what that was like and getting through it and, desiring the bottle again, but having your children as that point of reference and having this happen and being like, well, if I go back to the bottle, they could go there and this whole fucking mess that could happen.
Yeah.
So this will be our note for that, to where we'll pick up on episode 3. Perfect.
We got lots of conversation.
I love it. It's
awesome.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much.
That's the end of this episode of It's Dad Time, but there's plenty more where that came from. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and we'd love to hear from you, whether it's questions, success stories, or horror stories, so we can help you raise the next generation of happy and successful children. Follow us on Instagram and send us a message at itsdadtime_. We'll see you next time on It's Dad Time.